Welcome. This podcast is a collaboration of Religica and URI, United Religions Initiative.
Janessa Gans Wilder is a former CIA officer turned peacebuilder, social entrepreneur, and nonprofit executive. She founded the Euphrates Institute, a grassroots peacebuilding organization, after 5 years at the CIA, including 21 months serving in Iraq from 2003 to 2005. She has written dozens of articles and been interviewed by major news outlets, including CBS, CNN, and Democracy Now! The Euphrates Institute is also a URI Cooperation Circle. Take a listen.
The first question that we've been asking is, what are 3 values that are really important in your life?
Wow. I love that you start with values. That is really the underpinning, and so rarely we get to that level.
Right.
Well, as an organization, we have 7 values, and they kind of go in an arc. And so I can share those if that's okay. It starts with understanding, which is really the grounding for getting to know the other and getting to know ourselves and getting to know this earth and everything. But we don't want to leave it at understanding. We also need inspiration. So what are models and solutions for the issues that we're facing as a world? And then transformation. Then how do we both use that understanding and inspiration to transform ourselves, our communities, and the world? And with a mindset of service. Service is our 4th value, that this is really about deep, selfless service to a broader community. Sustainability is the next one. We want to do that service in a sustainable way, thinking forward to the 7 generations. And then oneness is our 6th value, which really, if we're doing all that, we're really seeing the interdependence and interconnectedness of mankind. And then the last and highest value is love, which really, if you think about why do we do any of this work? Why are we even on this planet? Our deepest yearning is to feel and experience that heart connection and that deep love.
How do you see those values lived out in the work that Euphrates Institute does?
Well, the values are so much in alignment with URI's values as well. And I think, so much of what we hear in different ways from different religions and different nationalities and ethnicities but it is back to oneness, back to being of service, back to greater understanding about each other and love. And so they're universal values in a way, but what I love is the different flavors that those values take depending upon the person, the circumstance, the country, the challenge that they're dealing with. And so I love that values can be universally applicable, but they can show up in very different practices. We're not talking about common practices. We're talking about common and shared values, that this group of values was created by a very diverse group of people from around the world who are part of our chapters. So I love that we can find such common ground on these basic fundamental ways, but then the way those values are lived just can show up in an infinite number of ways and different possibilities.
That's awesome. Do you have any specific examples that come to your mind when you say lived out differently?
Yeah. Well, everything from our chapters in Congo, they're bringing albinos and non-albinos together. Albinos are an incredibly stigmatized group of the population. Scores have been murdered, sacrificed in ceremonies, buried alive. I mean, it's just unbelievable, the discrimination and persecution against that community. So they're bringing people together to understand that they are not the other. They're actually human beings. They're not living sacrifices, and really bridging divides in that way. In Sudan, that looks at trying to recruit youth not for ISIS, but towards peace building. And as ISIS is stepping up its efforts, they're stepping up recruitment on youth campuses the other way, let's say. On American campuses, American students are doing anything from visiting mosques and synagogues to holding interfaith dialogues, to letter writing campaigns, to people who have undergone acts of discrimination, to looking at homeless issues. So it can really span the gamut of whoever the other is in a particular community, and then what's the biggest need, who is that other, and how do you turn that other into a brother, is what our motto is.
Beautiful. And I wasn't really aware of the albino issue, so that's...
Isn't it interesting? And you would never, and that's what I love, is that the people in those communities are going to know best who their other is and what the issue is that really, and obviously in the U.S. more and more it's the political divide. We are starting to dehumanize and even escalating to violence sometimes, this political divide. And so that local community is going to know what the issue is and then want help and training and how to address it. How do you turn the other into a brother? How do we find areas of common ground? How do we initiate that dialogue? How do we do acts of service together to help build those bridges?
That's a great concept, because a lot of times we have certain ideas of who the other is in different contexts, and there's actually, as you just mentioned, very diverse. And
so many. Oh, in India, a lot of times it's Hindus and Muslims, or it's youth and the older population. They experience a lot of age discrimination. There's gender discrimination, all sorts of ways that if we can come to the table and start to humanize the other. I think so often, this may be a simplistic way, a naive way of looking at it, but so much of it is because of that lack of understanding, that first value, because we don't know the other. And when we engage, when we actually meet face to face, we feel that heart connection, we share stories, it puts a human face on the news, it puts a human face on these issues that can seem so abstract. And then even that little bit of understanding can truly change mindsets.
Are there things that you think have prevented us from reaching that goal of creating this community and peace and that oneness that you spoke of already, or to a greater degree?
Gosh, I'm sure there are so many things, but one thing I think is sapping our energy in the wrong way is that we can tend to look to leaders to initiate that and to lead that process. I always love saying change doesn't come from Washington, it will come to Washington. But when we absolve ourselves of that personal responsibility and hope that our leader, they're going to take care of that, they're going to lead the change, they're going to fix the climate, that's just simply not going to happen. It simply won't happen. So when we hope to, let's just get the right person in office or change the minds of the people in power, then we'll be waiting forever. So the more that we can redirect that energy in taking personal responsibility, what is my sphere and how can I affect those things in my environment? I'm not, I personally know, I'm not going to go to Cameroon and fix the genocide that's happening there or counter ISIS in Sudan, but there are people on the ground ready to do that. I can support them in doing that by doing my own work in my own community, and then we can share best practices together. What did I learn from so-and-so and what they're doing? How can I support them, let them know they're not alone in that work? And that's just further motivation for me to do my work in my own sphere. And I know it's cliche, but as we each do our work in our sphere, that is truly how you change the world. That leader is just one person in office, which will rotate, and that person cannot change mindsets. It can't change the way communities are run. It can't change practices. It can't change systems. So we really need to think as individuals, how are we changing our own personal, the personal transformation that we undergo, then how are we affecting our interpersonal relationships? Then that coalesces into communities. How can communities be transformed and operate more functionally rather than dysfunctionally, and then that will have an impact on the collective. So I think one of the largest impediments is almost like an ignorance or a laziness or something, that absolving ourselves of that personal responsibility, hoping that other people will be leading the change when really it demands each one of us to lead the change.
What do you think are those qualities that really need to be brought out of people, and what do you think are the values that make a strong leader?
Yeah. Well, I would go back to the question you first asked, are our 7 values in my mind, because so often it's a lack of understanding of how your part affects the greater part. So when you realize how interconnected everything is, and how, for example, because I worked in the Middle East for over a decade, and every day, from the gas we put in our car to the wars that we're funding to the birthplace of our religions, it happens in this place far, far away, but that directly impacts our daily lives. So when we understand that it's connected and that I am part of this bigger picture, wow, that's understanding I've gained. Well, then once I understand that, then I need to take action. Well, then I need models. What does that look like? Who are examples I can follow? Who are visionaries that are doing this work at the community level, who are leading transformation? I need a visual. I need a roadmap. And then that goes back to then how am I going to change myself, the transformation piece, to be that change agent, to be that leader in infinite ways, as you said, and in a way that's in service. And so I think people just need a channel to direct. We all have that goodwill. We all have that energy. We all want to make a difference. I really believe that in the deep-seated goodness of humanity, but we need a nudge. The grooves are in the one way, and we need to establish new grooves. And so how do we show people that way? How do we create community of support around making those changes and really empower and equip each person to be that change agent?
When you heard that the theme was accelerating peace, besides coming here as URI, what drew you to come to this particular conference, and what did you think about what accelerating peace means and what we were going to do?
I think a lot of things could accelerate peace. One question I've been in lately is the funding streams that, if we want to accelerate peace, why are trillions of dollars going to the war industry and peace is not resourced and is not funded? And does that mean it's not valued? It's not worth investing in? And yet we say we want world, every beauty pageant, world peace is what they all want. But really we are directing abundance and flow of resources and attention and power to the opposite, to furthering the defense industry and the war industry. So that's a question I'm in, why are we saying we want one thing, but actually investing in the opposite? So that is one thing that I think would greatly accelerate peace, is to liberate that flow of resources, to reallocate those resources towards peace building. And that is in the whenever I've talked to the military about this, which my whole family is military background, I was in the CIA, I'm not anti-military at all. In fact, I want more work to be done on the preventative side, because it's those men and women who are sacrificing their lives on the front lines. So the more work that we invest in this, the safer that they will be. They are the ones actually the pointy edge of the spear. So, and they want the same thing. So I just feel that we're all on the same page. We want this, and yet we're not walking the talk. We're throwing our money in the other direction. So that's one thing. I would love that conversation to be more widespread and involve stakeholders to reallocate the financial resources towards where they will best serve humanity. And then the other thing is models of social change, are all tell us that it's the sort of political leadership that will come around at the end, like we talked about. And so the more that we can do to amplify the voices of visionaries in this arena who have solutions that are already working, peace exists. Peace is being built in the most unlikely of places, in the most unbelievable of circumstances. Let's amplify those stories and make them heroes, and then replicate what they're doing that's already working. It's actually a Stanford study from Everett Rogers, who looked at hundreds of case studies of how social change happened. He found that once 5% of a population accepted this new idea or new vision of what's possible, let's say peace, then it was considered embedded. And between 5 and 20% of the population, every time, sometime between 5 and 20%, it hit a tipping point, and then it reached the entire population. So we don't really have to get everyone on board with peace. You just have to build that critical mass between 5, sometimes it was 5.5%. 5 to 20% of the population is not a huge number if you're looking at a specific community, and then it hits that tipping point, and then it will accelerate. So I like to think that we are hovering around that 5% of the population. There seems to be this surge of awakening, of openness, of interfaith dialogue, and just readiness for this idea. And that it could be, we have to devote resources and attention and amplify those stories, because the other part of that study said about half of the population needs to be aware of the new idea in order to reach those people that it actually resonates with and who actually get what you're talking about. So we need to be sharing these stories, spreading these stories to reach the folks who get it, and then we can reach that tipping point, and then accelerating peace is inevitable. It's going to happen.
If you had to choose one question that you think it's essential that we be asking ourselves or the world at large in this kind of time and moment, what would that be for you?
I usually think of a statement, but to word it as a question is, who is your other? And how do you turn that other into a brother? Those are so simple, but so foundational. And then also my other big question that I am always in is, how can you see that your little part is connected to the bigger picture? Or how can you see that? Can you realize that? Can you feel the profoundness of that your little part matters to every other part, and that every other part matters to you? And how do we find ways to really tangibly open our eyes to that, and then let it infuse our daily lives, our daily work, what we're about, how we choose to do it? It's just that connectedness, the infinity of that, and yet the intimacy of that at the same time is a question I'm always in, and I'd love to wrestle with that with other people.
If you would like to know more about United Religion's initiative, read stories of interfaith in action, visit www.uri.org. And to learn more about Religica and our allies, take a look at www.religica.org. Thanks.